A man sits at a bar drinking, and he continues to drink until he's drunk. Eventually he gets up, gets into his car, and drives away. As he's driving, he crosses the center line, hits another man, a 55-year-old who was out for a ride on his motorcycle, and kills him. The drunk driver fled the scene. Then a whole year went by. So what happened after that? Was the driver ever held responsible? What about the bar that overserved the driver? How responsible were they? And just how dangerous are motorcycles compared to automobiles? In our everyday lives, we might hear about these stories on the evening news. Maybe it's a headline in the local paper, or perhaps just a red line of traffic on your way to work. But to the individuals involved, to their loved ones, and to those fighting on their behalf, each and every one of those stories represents some of the most devastating and challenging times in their lives. We share their stories with you. We examine real-life cases of loss, the legal battles that follow, and we talk about recovery too. What does justice look like? This is the True Claims Podcast. I'm Eric Johnson. This is Chris Davis, founder of the Davis Law Group. Obviously, Chris, a tragic story, one that is all too common, drunk driving accidents. This guy's name was John Santiago. What else can you tell us about that case?
Yeah, so we didn't get the case until like a year after the collision and his death. But one of the things that we were first interested in is investigating the bar that overserved the defendant that hit and killed him. That was paramount on our minds, and also finding out how much insurance the driver actually had.
So we mentioned that it didn't become your case till a year later. Why did that take so long, and what happens in that meantime? Like they obviously found this driver, someone found him.
Yeah. So the reason it took a year is because the family took that amount of time to decide whether to hire an attorney. Not that unusual. A little bit unusual for a death case, but understandably, the family is grieving. They're overwhelmed with the death and the death process. So to be brought in a year after the accident is not that uncommon for that type of case. But that's a lot of time to pass, and it can really impair the case from the standpoint of how successful it may be, because investigation then is delayed. Memories fade, witnesses may move or not even be known who were there, et cetera. So that was really important for us to get immediately involved and start our investigation process as soon as possible.
So the case ends up with Davis Law Group. Where do you start on something like this? Where do you go? How do you get this thing rolling?
So in any accident case involving a DUI driver, one of the first things that we want to know is where was the driver consuming alcohol? I would say 70 to 80% of the time, it's some sort of restaurant or bar. And so then we are asking ourselves, okay, is overservice an issue in this case? Can we prove that whomever served the alcohol to this driver overserved him or her? And so that's one of the first things that we're looking at. And also, of course, we're interested in learning what the police did as far as their investigation. So we immediately send out a request for the police law enforcement file to find out exactly what happened, who they spoke to, how the accident happened, whether criminal charges are being considered, and so forth.
So let's talk about insurance a little bit. You were telling me earlier that deciding or finding out if this man was insured is a huge part of the case. So it's not as simple as he's insured, therefore the insurance company pays out the family for their loss, and all is said and done.
Yeah, so most of the time, 60, 70% of the time, the insurance company will not tell us how much insurance actually exists. And the only way we can get that information is by filing a lawsuit where we get subpoena power and we can actually force them to disclose that information. So why does that happen? In my experience, it's because the insurance company is very protective over how much they may be legally required or contractually required to pay out on the claim. They don't want to set the expectation that the entire policy limit may be something that we could get, right? Is it a good reason, in my opinion? No, but that's how the industry kind of works. They protect their policy coverage amount, and they hope that they will be able to settle the claim at an amount below the coverage limit. That's really what it comes down to.
You told me one time the insurance company, even though you know a broker and you send your money to them every month, they are not your friend. Right? Yeah. And in this case, the insurance company, it must be outrageous to a family that this man is fully insured. That money should come to us, and yet you have to do detective work to find that out.
Yeah, and I tell our clients that there are two sides to the insurance company. There's a sales side that sells them the policy. That's the part of the insurance company that people have the most contact with, or maybe all of the contact with. But then there's the claim side. The claim side is the ferocious dog in the yard. The claim side will turn on you, the client, right, or the customer, if it means saving a few bucks for the carrier. That's reality.
So you've got a situation now. You've got the bar angle, and I think that's called a dram shop.
Right.
A claim, right? How often does that happen, by the way? There's so many drunk driving cases. Yeah. You said they're almost always served at a bar or a restaurant or something. Does that happen a lot, that the bar is held responsible?
That's a great question. So most attorneys don't bother to look into that. And I learned about 15, 20 years ago, and in the times that I did look into it, I would say 70, 80% of the time there was a claim there, right? And so now I've taught all my attorneys, all my staff, that we immediately start investigating the place where the defendant consumed alcohol. We also start a complaint with the State Liquor Control Board, or now it's called the Liquor and Cannabis Control Board. But to get the state involved from that department can aid the case tremendously, because they can go in and get information that I probably can't get, at least not as quickly as the government can. But yeah, we're constantly looking at that part of the case when it comes to DUI drivers. So
you could have gone after the bar, but you didn't in this particular case. Why was that?
A couple of reasons. We found out that the other driver had an unusually high amount of insurance, over $2 million. And we were able to collect that, get that coverage after several months of litigation. And number two, and most importantly, the family decided in the end that they just did not want to keep the case open. They were satisfied with the amount that were recovered from the driver, and told us that they did not want us to pursue the dram shop claim against the liquor establishment.
Can you tell me what the settlement was on this case?
$2.25 million.
$2.25 million.
Yeah, and I felt that was cheap for a death case. Yeah. Quite frankly, I was looking at least around $4 to $5 million, which is why, again, that's another reason to look at the bar or the restaurant where overservice may have occurred. It opens up an additional layer of coverage to compensate the innocent party here, which was the man's family.
That victim's family, they play a part in this, right? They have decisions to make, whether to accept that settlement, whether to ask you to go after more.
Absolutely. There's a whole different legal process that has to go on kind of behind the scenes. It's the probate action. And the probate action, the court appoints, usually it's one of the family members or more than one family member, to act as basically the person that makes the decisions for the person's estate, the decedent, the person that died, to make those decisions on what claims to pursue. And in this case, the family and the person that was appointed by the probate court decided, no, we're happy with the $2.25 million and we can close out the file.
I want to go back to the fact that it was a year before Davis Law Group got involved. Yeah. Is that a common scenario? I would think that maybe lawyers would be reaching out to the family. Is that what happens? Do you wait for them to come to you? How did it play out in this case?
Yeah, so first of all, we always wait for somebody to come to us. We do not actively solicit injury cases. And there are some lawyers that will do that. So, for instance, some lawyers, they get copies of the accident reports that are by law filed down in Olympia, and they'll send out letters to people. And that's a big no-no for me. I do not want to be put in that category of lawyers that do that. So the answer is no, we didn't reach out. A lot of the time, especially in the death case, a family will typically hire a lawyer sooner rather than later. Not always, and there are a number of reasons why the family may wait. Like I said before, the grief can be just overwhelming and can take many months for them to just accept the fact that their loved one has been killed, right? There's also the probate action that needs to be filed. Sometimes it has already been filed and there are other issues going on behind the scenes dealing with that person's estate and the family. And then a lot of other times, the family just doesn't know. They've never been in a situation like this. They think, a lot of times the families think that the authorities, like the police, are going to handle everything and that's it. The police don't handle the monetary damages that are caused by somebody that kills one of your family members. That's a civil attorney. That's what I do, right? So, but a lot of people don't know that. So, one of our missions is to educate the public, and so that's why we have books on wrongful death and what you need to do, and it's always better to hire an attorney in a death case sooner rather than later, always.
Let's talk about drunk driving. I mean, it has, of course, been around for as long as there have been motorized vehicles, maybe even longer. It doesn't seem to be going away. Maybe you know more about whether it's increased or decreased in the last few years, but it is certainly still an incredible problem. I know you've been involved with MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, for a long time. Right. Just your thoughts on the overall situation with people driving impaired.
It continues to be a problem, and I've learned over the years that just having higher, more restrictive or harsher laws is not the answer by itself. It takes education. It takes understanding that alcoholism is a disease, right? But at the same time, we see kind of on the front lines, like with liquor establishments in bars and restaurants. In the cases that I've investigated and handled, which is easily 100 or more cases over the years, the employees are not trained or educated on detecting whether somebody might have had too much already or whether somebody should be cut off. Usually the bar or the restaurant will have policies in place, but they're not being followed by the staff, right? And of course, there's a financial incentive for the restaurant and the bar to keep serving somebody. They're making more money. They want to create a happy customer. The server wants a bigger tip, right? So there are all these incentives to keep, encouraging people to keep drinking more and more and more. And then us as a society, we kind of see what can happen when it goes wrong. Somebody has too much, gets behind the wheel and causes a serious injury or kills somebody.
Such a tough thing to control. We've all been in situations where you see someone goes up to the bar, buys 3 drinks, one for themselves and a couple for other people. And so I always, in these situations, the Dram shop claim, I imagine it must be difficult, and we've got to figure something out for the bar to know where those drinks are going, who's consuming them, how many they've had. I mean, it's a tough situation, isn't it?
Yeah, and we've had cases where somebody orders 10 or more shots, and that person is able to take a platter of shots and walk away, and the people at the bar have no clue.
Right. How can they know?
Yeah, especially when it's busy. When you've got a packed bar or at a sporting event or something like that,
right?
There's no monitoring that goes on at all. And so, again, that shows you how easy it is for somebody to be overserved and then go out and cause a serious wreck.
How about cannabis? How about pot and marijuana?
Yeah.
How has that impacted the fight against driving impaired?
Yeah, so that raises some interesting issues in that it's more difficult to prove somebody is impaired from smoking pot. It's more difficult to prove that they are at a certain level that under the law would be considered affecting your ability to drive. And then 3, there are no laws that would allow us to sue a dispensary or a business that furnished the pot to somebody, right? So you take that away. So all of those factors then make it much more difficult to hold people accountable for driving impaired when they're stoned or when they've smoked too much pot or any other drugs besides alcohol.
We know they're out there, don't we?
Oh, they are out there. And we've had cases that have come to us where the person was stoned, but for one reason or another, we can't prove a good, solid legal case against that person. And we have to say either decline the case, or the only thing that's left is that driver's insurance limits, which oftentimes are very low, $25,000 tops.
We know there's a threshold for alcohol. We always hear about someone being 3 times the legal limit. Is there a legal limit for cannabis?
Right now in Washington State is 5 nanograms. What is a nanogram? Great question. And how do you measure it? You only can measure it by a blood test. So that's another problem with going after drivers who have smoked too much pot, is we don't have an alcohol breathalyzer that can detect marijuana out on the scene like troopers can do with drunk driving. So the person has to undergo a blood test, and the cops are not going to do that on their own. They typically have to take it to the hospital.
That could be 2 hours.
2 hours, plus you need a warrant potentially for that. So there are all these legal hurdles that one has to overcome to actually prove a case when there's pot or marijuana involved.
I had a state patrolman tell me one time, if you knew how many people were out there driving impaired with drugs or alcohol, you'd be afraid to get in your car.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a lot.
I believe that,
Yeah.
absolutely.
How about motorcycles? You wrote a book. It's called The Road to Justice, a legal guide to motorcycle accident claims. These books, we've talked about them. They're fascinating. They help people understand the laws, the rules, safety situations. Tell me about this book. Tell me how dangerous motorcycles are compared to, say, automobiles.
Yeah. So I think I've authored and published 14 or 15 different books, many of which address certain types of cases that we see in my office. And so motorcycles is one category. And unfortunately, we do see a lot of motorcycle accident cases, primarily because, when you're on a motorcycle, you're unprotected, as opposed if you were in a vehicle. Motorcycles are exponentially more dangerous than automobiles for that reason alone. A minor fender bender involving 2 motor vehicles could be catastrophic and kill a motorcycle rider. And so there are certain laws in place that affect motorcycle operators, licensing requirements and so forth. But the other thing that I'll mention with motorcycles is that the insurance requirements are not as strict for motorcycles than they are for drivers of regular automobiles. Why? That's just the way the legislature decided it. But for instance, there are no mandatory minimums involving motorcycle riders, especially under their own policy as far as providing medical benefit protection or uninsured motorist protection. So a lot of times when we get a motorcycle case, the motorcyclist that we represent has a minimum policy of $25,000, no underinsured or uninsured motorist coverage, and they were hit by another vehicle that only has $25,000 in coverage. So $50,000, even for a minor case when we've got injuries, catastrophic injuries in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? We see that scenario too often. It happens all the time, at least once or twice a month maybe, or once or twice every 60 days. And so motorcycle operators need to be very diligent and savvy enough to find an insurance company that will adequately insure them, not for causing somebody else's damage, but for being hit by somebody else and causing damage to themselves.
What do you think the chances of being seriously injured, how do those chances go up without a helmet? And the reason I ask is I see these people on scooters in the downtown area all the time. They're not wearing helmets. Obviously, most motorcycle riders use a helmet, but I would think that the chances of being seriously injured in a situation go way up if you're not wearing a helmet.
Yeah, you're spot on. And we see that, especially in bicycle cases. So, we've represented bicycle riders who were not wearing a helmet at the time, and had they wore a helmet, they probably wouldn't have needed an attorney, right? The injuries are that much more severe. So with the scooters, we see the scooters downtown Seattle a lot, and most, if not all of those riders are not wearing helmets. The odds of suffering a catastrophic brain injury go up exponentially as well, for sure.
So this case, the John Santiago case, unfortunate man is hit and killed by a drunk driver who crosses the road. You know, it takes into account the drunk driving situation, being overserved at a bar. The fact that he's on a motorcycle may or may not have played into the fact that he didn't survive. All of these things come together, you know, on a road one night when a guy was overserved while drinking alcohol. Your job is to give some sort of relief to the family of the victim. Right. That must feel good on some level when you can make that happen.
Absolutely. And it's one of the reasons why I'm still practicing law today is the huge difference that we can make, especially in a case like that, to surviving family members. And you mentioned all of the issues or questions that need to be addressed. You know, it's like when we get a case like this, we're automatically juggling 8 to 10 balls in the air, right? Trying to get answers to each of those balls, each of those issues involved in the case. And it can be very time consuming and it can take many months. It depends on the case. On the other side of it, we've got to make sure the family is being taken care of. We typically advise them to get counseling if they need that. We can send them to certain counselors that specialize in grief counseling. We're dealing with their own insurance policies, whether it's a life insurance policy or a disability policy that their family member has. We're trying to get all of that coverage sorted out, and we're investigating the other driver to see what he or she did and how bad it was, whether there's a dram. I mean, there's so many things that go on, but it needs to go on immediately as soon as possible after the collision to dramatically increase the chances of a good outcome in the case. I mean, that's what it really comes down to. So unfortunately, with this family, the Santiago family, they waited a year. Now, fortunately, it didn't hurt the case in the sense that we got all of the insurance coverage from the defendant's driver, but had they wanted to go after the dram shop, waiting a year significantly lessens the probability of a win on that claim, right? So anytime your family member has been killed and you suspect a possible legal claim, you should always hire an attorney right away.
Chris, thank you very much. Your books, I can't talk about these books enough. They're really amazing and I think so important for people to look at and learn just because of those situations, you know, how to hire a lawyer. What do the rules say about bicycles or motorcycles? They're fascinating. You do great work. This is the True Claims Podcast. It's been great chatting with you. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next time. Eric Johnson here. I spent the last 30 years reporting on what you need to know, and now I've got something I think everyone could use. The Washington Accident Book Series offers a free legal guidebook on everything from car crashes to dog bites, so that you know what to expect after any kind of accident. Know your rights and how to avoid common mistakes after an accident by getting your free copy at WashingtonAccidentBooks.com.